Upon reviewing the National Council for the Social Studies 10 themes that they have listed, the first thing that I see and that I noticed is a comprehensive list that highlights everything that is typically covered in a social studies class, whether that be world history, American history, civics, economics. All of the items listed there are covered in those classes, and that's the first thing that I see. But as I take a look at it and I think for myself, a few things that come to my mind is that if you look at each theme, they can all be broken down to different variables. And you could even argue that they could be broken down into different themes. For example, to look at the first one and see culture, we can look at that and see it as one theme. But as we think about it, does culture include religion? And if it does, then maybe religion and culture should be two different themes in and of themselves instead of just combined into one. And that's not the only theme where you could probably break it down. You could look at different ones and probably say the same thing for each one. So they all have different variables that make up one theme that maybe they could be broken down, and that would be more comprehensive instead of just saying religion's just a part of culture, because we can see how religion, no matter what it is, has affected society throughout all of history. And then another thing that I think about and I wonder, and it's even mentioned in the article that's accompanied with the link that we've been looking at, is that these themes overlap in a lot of different areas, and you can't really teach one without the other. So if you're looking at culture and religion and you think about that, it's hard to talk about those topics without mentioning how they have changed over time, which is the second theme, is talks about change, continuity, and time. And you can look at the church, for example. You can look at how different it is throughout its history, from the early days to the Middle Ages, and then the Protestant Reformation, the Counter Reformation, the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening. And there's just so much change that's happened over time that it's hard to just say the church and not provide all that background. So they overlap, and that is mentioned. It's not just the first two themes. You could make that case for pretty much all of the themes. And after I wonder or think about those things, it makes me wonder about the difficulty of teaching a social studies class. Because in teaching a social studies class, we have all of these themes. They can all be broken down. They all overlap. And it's not easy to make sure that we're giving these students the full picture that they need to have a good understanding of the content and material we're trying to get across to them. So we want to be comprehensive, but we also want to go into greater detail and to provide context for everything that we're talking about. So it's a challenge. It's not easy. And another thing that I wonder about is, am I preparing myself to give students this good, full, accurate picture of what I'm going to be teaching them? Am I trying to put in the proper research that I need to do now to prepare myself to be able to teach this content? And another thing that's probably the main thing that sticks out to me that I wonder about is that of personal finance, and that becoming a required class in social studies. It makes me wonder if that's the best thing to do. Now, I'm not saying that personal finance isn't an important class and that it shouldn't be required, but should this really fit in the subject of social studies? Or could it better be placed somewhere else? Maybe a math class, or just offer it as a required class and it stay within the realm of CTE instead of being a social studies class? Because we have we're already trying to merge American History 1 and American History 2 into one class. So that means we're going to have an even more difficult time covering all these different themes and giving this good, clear picture, like we talked about, to our students, because we're just combining so much history into a one semester class. I remember whenever I was a freshman in high school and taking world history, my first semester, it was my first period class of my first semester, the teacher walked in and said, all right, we're going to be learning about the history of the world in one semester. And we can, just by saying that, we have an understanding about how difficult that is, how impossible it is to do that. And now we're trying to cram history classes, our social studies classes, we're trying to cram them down even more now and merge them together. So it makes me wonder, is adding personal finance the right move? And I'm not saying that I have the answer, but I think it's something definitely worth looking at and trying to determine if it is the best thing to do. And there's probably pros and cons to each side of the argument, but I just wonder if it should be a social studies class. Maybe it should be required, but not as a social studies class. But I admit that I don't have it all figured out. I don't have all the answers, and I'm probably a little biased because I'm not very good at math, and I think that there's a lot of my fellow history majors who would agree with me. The reason we're studying history is because that's what we enjoy, and we haven't taken many math classes while being in college. I've taken one math class, and it wasn't even a high-level math class. It was Math 143. So the history teachers that we have now, the social studies teachers, really prepared to teach personal finance to these students? Or would someone with a better background in math or in the field of personal finance, like in a CTE, are those teachers better equipped to teach this subject to their students? So I think personal finance becoming a social studies class, and whether or not that's the right move, is the main thing that I wonder about as I look at the 10 themes that are provided by the National Council of Social Studies. So I thank you for tuning in, and over and out.